You felt this message before you clicked on it. Something in you knew. Because you are not ordinary, you never have been. You have walked through rooms and felt unseen. You have spoken truth and watched people grow uncomfortable. You have carried revelation in silence because you sensed they would not understand. And that was not insecurity. That was discernment. Listen carefully. You are living in a season where your light must be preserved at all costs. Not polished, not diluted, preserved. There are forces that study brightness. Darkness does not attack what is dim. It studies what shines. You have wondered why conversations leave you drained. Why explaining yourself feels like bleeding. Why the more you justify your calling, the smaller you feel. It is not weakness. It is spiritual warfare. You are marked. You are set apart. You are carrying something sacred. And today you will understand why protecting it changes everything. There are 9 sacred boundaries that neutralize darkness while preserving your divine light. Not walls of fear, but gates of wisdom. Not isolation for insecurity, but separation for assignment. Only the chosen recognize this tension. Only the chosen feel this internal pull between revealing and retreating. If this resonates, you already know why you are here. Stay with this. Stand firm in it, because what you are about to hear will confirm what you have always sensed. First, sacred boundary number 1. You refuse to explain your calling to those who were never meant to understand it. You remember the moment when you tried to share what you felt, the vision, the burden, the fire inside you, and their eyes changed. Confusion, dismissal, subtle mockery. You felt it, so you started shrinking your language, softening your truth, translating revelation into something more acceptable. But every time you did something, inside you dimmed. Why? Because over-explaining drains anointing. You were never meant to convince the world of what heaven already confirmed. Listen, not everyone has the capacity to hold your revelation. Some minds are wired for routine, not destiny. Some spirits are comfortable in the ordinary. You are not. And when you pour divine downloads into skeptical containers, you feel contaminated, doubted, disturbed. It is not paranoia. It is spiritual sensitivity. Darkness does not always attack with aggression. Sometimes it attacks with doubt, with subtle questioning, with innocent curiosity that carries hidden resistance. And you felt it, that tightness in your chest, that heaviness after sharing too much. That was your spirit warning you. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. When you stop explaining yourself, something shifts. You conserve energy. You protect clarity. You guard the sacred. Your calling does not need applause. It needs protection. You were rejected before not because you were wrong, but because you were early, because you were ahead, because you were carrying language they could not decode. Reframe it. Rejection was confirmation. Isolation was preparation. The world calls it arrogance when you stop explaining, but heaven calls it maturity. You are learning that mystery preserves momentum, that silence frustrates darkness, that not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Let them misunderstand. You stay aligned, because when you stop over-explaining, your light stabilizes. It stops flickering under scrutiny. It burns steady. And that steadiness, it unsettles darkness more than arguments ever could. Hold this boundary. Guard your revelation, because what comes next will require even greater separation. Second, sacred boundary number 2. You withdraw access from those who feed on your light but resist your growth. You have felt this before. The conversations that revolve around you but never pour into you. The people who love your warmth but grow silent when you speak about elevation. The ones who celebrate your comfort but shrink when you mention destiny. You noticed it. They enjoy your presence. They depend on your strength. They call you when they are drowning. But when you start rising, they hesitate. Listen carefully. Not everyone who loves your warmth honors your assignment. Some are drawn to your glow, not your growth. Some admire your peace but resist your expansion. Some want access to your energy, not alignment with your evolution. And you felt guilty for seeing it. You told yourself you were overthinking. You told yourself you were becoming distant. You questioned your own discernment. But why did you always feel drained after certain interactions? Why did your vision feel foggy after being around certain people? Because companionship and consumption feel similar at first. Both smile, both listen, both stay close. But one supports your destiny, the other feeds on your light. This is warfare. Darkness does not always attack you directly. Sometimes it attaches to you relationally. It studies you, leans on you, pulls from you, slowly, quietly, until you are exhausted. You are not selfish for noticing the pattern. You are awakening. When you begin to grow, everything connected to your smaller self becomes uncomfortable. And those who were assigned to your old version will resist your new level. That resistance is not random. It is confirmation. You are expanding. You are stretching beyond the space they knew how to occupy. And instead of shrinking back, you must draw a line. Distance is not cruelty. Distance is purification. When you withdraw access, you are not punishing them. You are protecting the anointing. You are preserving the oil. Because oil is expensive. It costs you nights of isolation. It costs you battles no one saw. It costs you tears that never made it public. You will not allow someone to casually consume what heaven refined through warfare. You are chosen. Chosen means selective. Selective means boundaries. Let them call you distant. Let them say you changed. You did. You were supposed to. Favor requires separation. Growth demands pruning. Light intensifies when it is not constantly siphoned. Stand firm in this. You are not obligated to provide unlimited access. You are not required to be endlessly available. You are not assigned to be someone's permanent emotional power source. When you withdraw, you feel clearer, stronger, more aligned. That clarity is evidence. That strength is confirmation. And as you begin to close doors that once drained you, something shifts in the atmosphere. Darkness loses proximity. Your light stabilizes. Your energy sharpens. And what happens next requires even deeper discipline. Third, sacred boundary number 3. You guard your peace more aggressively than you guard your reputation. You have noticed it. The subtle bait, the sideways comments, the deliberate misunderstandings. Have you ever felt someone trying to pull you into a reaction? Not a conversation, a reaction. Because reactions are currency in the realm of darkness. When you react, you descend. When you descend, you lose altitude. When you lose altitude, your authority weakens. And the enemy knows this. You used to defend yourself quickly. You used to clarify every rumor. You used to correct every lie. Because you thought reputation was protection. But listen, your peace is protection. Darkness provokes because it cannot overpower you directly. It cannot outshine your light. It cannot dismantle your calling. So it tries to disturb your atmosphere. It tries to shake you emotionally, to ignite frustration, to lure you into arguments designed to lower your frequency. Why? Because when you argue in the flesh, you momentarily step out of spiritual authority, and you felt that before. That moment after a heated exchange, that heaviness, that inner dissonance, you won the argument, but you lost your stillness. That was the lesson. You are not called to win debates. You are called to maintain dominion. Understand this. Silence is not surrender. Calmness is not weakness. Your composure is warfare. When someone throws words at you and you refuse to catch them, something destabilizes in the spirit realm. They expected fire. They prepared for resistance. They wanted escalation. But you gave them stillness, and stillness confuses darkness. Because darkness feeds on chaos, you have matured. You no longer chase every lie. You no longer defend every narrative. You no longer need to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. That restraint is power. You are not passive. You are positioned. There is a difference. The world guards image. The chosen guard atmosphere. Because once your peace is disturbed, your clarity is compromised. And once clarity is compromised, decisions weaken. So you draw the line, you walk away, you disengage, you let them speak. Not because you cannot respond, but because you do not need to. Favor defends you in silence. Heaven corrects what you refuse to chase. And here is the deeper truth. When you stop reacting, some people intensify. They push harder. They provoke louder. They escalate tactics. That escalation is exposure. It reveals who was feeding on your emotional output. But you stay steady. You breathe. You remain anchored. You guard your inner world like sacred territory. Because it is. Peace is not comfort. Peace is authority. And when you protect it more fiercely than your public image, you shift into a higher realm of power. You become spiritually untouchable. Darkness cannot control what it cannot disturb. Hold this line. Do not descend, because the next boundary will demand even greater separation. Fourth, sacred boundary. Number 4, you stop rescuing people assigned to their own lessons. This one pierced you, because your heart is not cold. It is compassionate. It is responsive. It feels deeply. You have always been the strong one, the listener, the stabilizer in storms that were not even yours. When someone cried, you moved. When someone fell, you lifted. When someone broke, you tried to rebuild them. And at first it felt noble. It felt righteous. But why were you always exhausted? Why did helping others so often leave you spiritually depleted? Because not every cry is your assignment. Listen carefully. Darkness will weaponize your compassion if you do not discipline it. Your savior instinct was beautiful, but it entangled you in battles heaven never assigned to you. You stepped into lessons that were meant to shape them. You interrupted consequences that were meant to mature them. You absorbed burdens that were meant to teach them endurance. And in doing so, you delayed yourself. You thought you were loving, but sometimes you were interfering. There is a difference between being available and being appointed. You are not called to fix every broken story. You are not sent to rescue every drowning soul. You are not responsible for growth that requires pain. Pain is not always punishment. Sometimes pain is instruction. And when you constantly remove discomfort from someone's path, you remove the very fire meant to refine them. You learned this the hard way. You watched people repeat cycles. You saw patterns return. You felt frustration rising. Why? Because divine light is not meant to enable stagnation. You were never called to be someone's permanent solution. You were called to walk your assignment. The chosen often attract the wounded. The marked often draw the lost. Your light is visible, but visibility does not equal responsibility. You must discern. Are you helping them grow, or are you helping them avoid growth? That question changes everything. When you stop rescuing, guilt tries to rise. It whispers that you are abandoning, that you are becoming hardened, that you are losing compassion. That is not truth. That is manipulation. Compassion without wisdom becomes captivity. You are not abandoning them. You are releasing them to their process. And release is not cruelty. Release is trust. Trust that God is teaching them. Trust that struggle is shaping them. Trust that you are not their source. You are chosen. Chosen means you carry purpose, not permanent rescue missions. You release what heaven never authorized you to carry. You step back. You let lessons unfold. And when you do, something shifts inside you. Your energy returns. Your clarity sharpens. Your focus intensifies. Because you are no longer bleeding for battles that were never yours. This boundary is heavier. It requires strength. It requires restraint. It requires faith. But once you establish it, darkness loses another access point. And what comes next demands even greater discipline of your inner world. Fifth, sacred boundary number 5. You no longer reveal strategy before it manifests. This is where your awareness shifts. You used to announce what you were building. You used to share the vision while it was still forming. You spoke dreams out loud, hoping for encouragement. And sometimes you received applause. But other times, something stalled. Plans slowed. Energy scattered. Momentum dissolved. You felt it. The strange resistance that appeared after you talked too soon. The subtle opposition that rose without warning. That was not coincidence. Premature exposure invites sabotage. Listen, not every ear clapping for you is aligned with you. Some ears are spiritually wired to report to darkness. That sounds intense, but you have lived it. You shared an idea and suddenly doubt increased. You announced a move and suddenly obstacles multiplied. You revealed growth and suddenly tension surrounded you. Why? Because revelation is power, and power when exposed too early attracts interference. You are not just ambitious, you are anointed. An anointing must be guarded in its incubation stage. Seeds do not break soil the moment they are planted. They grow underground, in silence. in darkness. Not because they are weak, because they are developing strength. You have been frustrated by delays before. You wondered why things slowed down after you spoke. You questioned your own discipline, but the lesson was forming. Move in silence. Not secrecy born of fear, silence born of wisdom. There is a difference. When you stop revealing strategy prematurely, your energy condenses. Your focus sharpens. Your authority stabilizes. You stop leaking vision. You stop inviting commentary. You stop allowing small minds to weigh in on divine instruction. Mystery becomes tactical protection. Let them see the result, not the blueprint. Let them witness the fruit, not the planting. You are not obligated to narrate your evolution. You are called to execute it. This is where you begin to understand your power. Your ideas carry weight. Your movement shifts atmospheres. Your progress threatens systems that benefit from your stagnation. That is why exposure triggers warfare. But when you move quietly, darkness cannot intercept what it cannot detect. You build, you prepare, you ascend. And then one day, you appear transformed. Not because it happened overnight, but because you refuse to broadcast the process. You are dangerous to darkness when you operate like this. Strategic, composed, unpredictable. You no longer need validation before manifestation. You no longer require applause before action. You let results speak, and when they do, they speak loudly. Stand in this. Guard the blueprint. Let silence become your ally, because what comes next will challenge who you allow inside your inner world. Sixth, sacred boundary number 6. You refuse emotional access to those who only want informational access. You have seen this pattern. The questions that sound innocent, the interest that feels flattering, the conversations that circle around your life, your plans, your mindset. But something feels off. They want to know about you, but they do not want to know you. Have you felt that difference? Curiosity is not the same as covenant. Interest is not the same as alignment. Some people study you the way spectators study a game, observing, analyzing, gathering data, but never investing hard. And you used to open up. You thought transparency built connection. You believed vulnerability created closeness. But why did you feel exposed afterward? Why did you sense pieces of yourself scattered? Because not everyone asking questions deserves proximity. There are those who want informational access. They want updates. They want insight. They want details about your growth, your struggles, your breakthroughs. But they do not carry the capacity to steward your heart. That is spiritual surveillance. It is subtle. It does not look aggressive. It looks engaged. But engagement without alignment becomes intrusion. You are not paranoid for feeling protective. You are discerning. Your inner world is sacred territory. Your thoughts, your prayers, your emotional processing, your spiritual downloads. These are not public property. You are marked, and marked people must be careful who they allow into the control room. Because once someone has emotional access, they can influence atmosphere. They can plant doubt. They can shift focus. They can introduce confusion, even unintentionally. That is why access must be earned, not assumed. Not everyone who listens is safe. Not everyone who nods is aligned. Not everyone who seems supportive carries the grace to handle your depth. You have matured. You now test alignment before transparency. You observe consistency before vulnerability. You watch how they handle small truths before entrusting deeper ones. That is not hardness. That is stewardship. You are learning that you can be kind without being exposed. You can be loving without being open to everyone. Light attracts attention, but attention does not equal assignment. The enemy cannot attack what he cannot enter, and he often enters through emotional proximity. So you close the gate, not to become distant, but to remain powerful. When you protect your inner world, your clarity sharpens. When you guard emotional access, your authority strengthens. When you limit proximity, your peace deepens. You are not here to be accessible to everyone. You are here to fulfill destiny, and destiny requires selective intimacy. Stand in that. Do not apologize for protecting your heart, because the next boundary will test your obedience in ways that separate the chosen from the attached. 7th, sacred boundary. Number 7, you reject guilt when obedience requires separation. This one tested your heart. Because you are loyal, you are committed. You do not walk away lightly. So when obedience began pulling you in a different direction, you felt torn. You felt the tension, the quiet instruction in your spirit saying, move, while familiar voices whispered, stay. Have you felt that split? The calling rising, the comfort clinging. Darkness knows it cannot always stop your destiny, so it tries to slow you with guilt. It whispers that leaving is betrayal, that growth is arrogance, that elevation is abandonment. But listen carefully, divine obedience will offend comfort, and it always has. When you outgrow spaces, those still comfortable, there will call your expansion pride. When you shift environments, those rooted in familiarity will call your obedience disloyalty. But obedience is not cruelty. It is alignment. Some relationships were seasonal. Some connections were developmental. Some bonds were preparation, not permanence. And when the season shifts, clinging becomes disobedience. You felt guilt because you care. But guilt is not always conviction. Sometimes it is manipulation dressed as morality. Darkness weaponizes guilt to weaken chosen vessels. If it can make you feel responsible for everyone's comfort, it can stall your movement. If it can make you fear disappointing people, it can delay your ascent. But you are not here to maintain comfort. You are here to fulfill assignment. An assignment requires motion. You have already noticed it. When you stay too long in spaces you have outgrown, your spirit feels suffocated. Your creativity declines. Your peace unsettles. That is not random. That is misalignment. You are marked for elevation, and elevation demands separation. Not because you are better, but because you are called. There is a difference. The world clings to familiarity. The chosen follow instruction. You cannot carry everyone into your next level. You cannot drag old dynamics into new dimensions. Some doors must close, some voices must fade. Some relationships must end. Not in anger, not in hatred, but in obedience. You choose destiny over familiarity without apology. You bless them. You release them. You move forward. And when guilt tries to rise again, you silence it. Because you know this truth now. You were not separated to be lonely. You were separated to be positioned. Positioned for influence, positioned for authority, positioned for greater responsibility. And when you accept that something inside you solidifies, you stop wavering. You stop negotiating your next level. You walk with quiet certainty, because what is for you cannot be blocked by separation. It is activated by it. Stand firm. Do not retreat, because the next boundary will require you to break agreements you once believed were permanent. Eighth, sacred boundary number 8. You sever agreements made in seasons of weakness. This is deeper, because this is not about other people first. This is about you, about decisions you made when you were tired, when you were insecure, when you were still discovering who you were. You remember those seasons, when you tolerated what you should have confronted, when you accepted less than you were called to carry, when you made silent vows just to survive. I will endure this. I will stay small. I will not ask for more. Those agreements felt necessary then, but they were born in weakness, and what is born in weakness cannot govern your mature identity. Listen carefully. Old vows lose authority when identity evolves. You are not who you were. You are not the insecure version, not the doubting version, not the shrinking version. But some agreements linger. Subtle permissions, quiet compromises, invisible contracts with fear, and you feel it. That internal resistance when you try to rise higher. That familiar ceiling you keep hitting. That whisper that says, stay where you are. That whisper is an old agreement. Darkness studies your weak seasons. It tries to preserve the version of you that was unsure. But that version has expired. Spiritual contracts expire when identity matures. You must declare that, out loud, internally, with conviction. You revoke access that was granted from insecurity. You break tolerance with mediocrity. You cancel vows that kept you small. You withdraw consent from patterns that limited your authority. This is not symbolic. This is spiritual. Because every time you tolerated disrespect, you taught your spirit to accept it. Every time you compromised conviction, you normalized it. Every time you silenced your power, you buried it deeper. But now you are awake. You are aware. You are no longer negotiating with fear. You reclaim ground that was subtly surrendered, not violently, but decisively. You take back your standards. You take back your voice. You take back your boundaries. And something shifts immediately. Confidence rises. Clarity intensifies. Authority returns. Because the real battle was never external. It was internal permission. Once you withdraw permission from weakness, darkness loses leverage. You are not bound by who you were. You are defined by who you are becoming. Stand up in that, sever it, break it, release it. Do not carry outdated agreements into a new level. You are spiritually dangerous when you operate from maturity instead of memory. And what comes next? It is the final gate, the irreversible line, the boundary that changes everything. Ninth, sacred boundary number 9. You close the final gate, no more negotiation with what tried to destroy you. This is the line, the irreversible one. You remember how it almost consumed you, the pattern, the person, the habit, the mindset. It nearly took you out. It drained your light, it blurred your clarity, it weakened your conviction, and still, part of you used to revisit it, not physically always, but mentally, through nostalgia, through pity, through maybe this time will be different. Have you noticed darkness rarely knocks down the front door once you awaken? It whispers from memory. It shows you edited highlights of what almost destroyed you. It tempts you with familiarity. But this time you see clearly. You stop entertaining energies that once nearly consumed you. No more revisiting old conversations. No more romanticizing toxic seasons. No more giving mental space to what God already removed. Temptation loses power when you refuse to dialogue with it. Understand this. The enemy negotiates. Destiny does not. Darkness bargains. Light declares. You are no longer bargaining. You are declaring. You close the final gate. Not halfway, not temporarily, not emotionally, decisively. You block access. You sever pathways. You shut doors that once remained slightly open just in case. There is no just in case anymore, because you finally understand something. What almost destroyed you cannot be part of your destiny. Read that again in your spirit. What almost destroyed you cannot walk with you into purpose. You are not weak for having struggled. You are being refined. You are not ashamed of your past. You are being trained. The warfare you survived built discernment. The betrayal you endured built strength. The isolation you faced built authority. And now you are dangerous to darkness. Because you recognize it before it speaks. You shut it down before it grows. You close the gate before it enters. This boundary is irreversible. When you enforce it, your light stops flickering. It stabilizes. It intensifies. It burns. Not chaotic, not desperate, but steady, like judgment. And darkness knows. It cannot infiltrate through nostalgia. It cannot infiltrate through guilt. It cannot infiltrate through memory. Because you have matured. You are no longer surviving. You are reigning. Stand in that. Do not reopen what God closed. Do not negotiate with what tried to erase you. Do not soften toward what was sent to sabotage you. Hold the line. Now hear this clearly. You are chosen, not randomly, not accidentally. Chosen. Protected through storms that should have broken you. Preserved through battles that should have ended you. Positioned through isolation that should have discouraged you. But you are still here, still standing, still rising, still shining. That is not luck. That is destiny. Every rejection prepared you. Every delay strengthened you. Every attack revealed your capacity. You were never ordinary. You were being forged. Comment 9 if you are closing the final gate. Declare it publicly. Stand in it boldly. Subscribe if you know this is confirmation, not coincidence. Because this is not just content. This is activation. You are marked. You are guarded. You are untouchable by ordinary forces. And nothing formed against you will stand. Not now, not ever.